Can you create peace from chaos? Can you take something that is inherently destructive and instead utilize it for calm? Can you take a moment that is otherwise entropy or pain mixed with brutal exhaustion and instead turn it into something beautiful, maybe even elevate it to an art form? Watch until the end and find out. It always starts with the blank canvas. I sit and still myself as much as possible while getting into the early stages of my technique. In this case, the thumbtacks that I use to prop the canvas up. I do this to keep the painting off of the drop pan below, such that whatever paint I apply doesn't flow over the edge and literally glue it to the ground. That sort of thing would put considerable damper on progress, you know? Once again, I start with some unbleached titanium white, the Switzerland of paint colors, as it provides a very amicable base from which to build off of. In this case, I'm complementing the white with a Naples pink and a highly reflective silver. The latter acts as the first element of chaos in this painting, insofar as it being metallic and very visually apart from its current peers. Early days and or layers are all about experimentation here, so throwing down a shiny black and then washing it over with a custom blended blue is par for the course. Phthalo blue is such a striking color. I've used it over the years as a spike of contrast and a strong standalone in some monochromatic drawings that I'm not even sure exist anymore. Everything needs its proper balance, though, so the piercing blue here was toned down by a series of pinks, custom pigments, and otherwise. It's so key to find the balance in creation, as that is one of the major hallmarks of so called progress, or at least the signifier of finishing a piece, that moment where everything just clicks in the painting, where the balance is fully achieved, maybe in only the most delicate of ways, but nonetheless. Funny enough, these initial layer experiments of soft pastel like hues would soon take a turn in the opposite direction, going from a placid feel to a very fiery one. I'm generally not very chatty in real life. I once went an entire month without a single utterance, so creating is a way of speaking for me. Speaking without words, obviously, but instead with color and shape. Admittedly, sometimes the old brain only has the loosest of ideas to put forth, and then they have to be sorted out once they hit the canvas. But the process of solving these communication issues culminates in something so beautifully simple, something pulled from the ether of silence and dark of my mind, adding in layer after layer, sculpting them, or simply washing them over the surface seems such a basic thing, and yet I enjoy it so much. A lot of times the canvas represents two different directions, two different ideas of what I want things to look like. I'll add in a layer after a layer, taking moments in between to allow time for most layers to dry, calculating which colors to add in and what transparencies and so on. I suppose on one level it's a form of math, with each layer being a highly sorted expression of color and shape, bridging one point in its completion to another. I have a mental catalog of what certain pigments do to the others, how one paint reacts to a collection, and so on. It's not an exact math or science here, as the notation, if you will, is constantly changing, and I have to constantly adapt, as sometimes these pieces take on their own momentum, and I, like some midnight cowboy, have to rein it back in. Or, wait, maybe not Midnight Cowboy, as that's a poor reference, but maybe someone that's good at throwing around livestock? How about a capable guy wearing questionably comfortable boots? Admittedly, a large part of the process is silence, the sitting and waiting after approaching the canvas to study it for long periods of time, or just being in the general studio vicinity, working on other projects, or my life at large. Over the years, I've worked as a commissions artist and a fine artist, and almost everything else. I've illustrated comics, taught cartooning classes for kids, and drew, but never performed, if that's how you describe it, tattoos. I've been in many different galleries, even some legitimate ones. Other ones, not so much, being designed to prey on the artist's need to, quote, make it, and through shady business practices extort thousands of dollars from said artists to put on an exhibition that made no effort to attract any real art patrons. So opening night was just those desperate artists in attendance. I would name names, but let's just say do your research on the opportunity to make sure it's just not some type of ego pandering extortion. I have been in many different types of show. Ones in cafes, quick setups on the sidewalk, and even the dreaded country carnival, sit in a dirty field and hope variant. The vast majority of them have not been successful. Sometimes, as I progress through these pieces, layer after layer, I find a movement or direction that feels natural. It feels, for lack of a better description, easy. With this piece, it seemed as if things were being forged, metal into metal, fire into fire. It felt like I was able to arrange all the chaos in parallel, complementary directions at this point. And, as one after another of these layers was put down, I got the unmistakable feeling of an elemental warmth, of something primal and heated, of a refusal to accept that Blockbuster is finally gone, and rock and roll may finally be dead, among other things. Sometimes the best tool is the one you make, the one you don't even know you needed, or the one you liberate from some random antique shop because you were bored and you were just trying to make the best of having to be at an antique shop while your wife's friend runs around looking for what she calls treasures. I have a firm supply of what I suppose I could call my own treasures in this fashion. Too many to actually use, but something for every possible need, which I suppose is the point. Better prepared than not, right? Some things in life you just cannot prepare for, though, like pandemics, or having a colicky baby 5 months before said pandemic kicked off its jams, or having your health fail due to crippling amounts of stress while you try to maintain, as most of your friends moved away to lead brilliant lives halfway or more around the country, and your support system imploded. Luck just doesn't grant me any favors, and a constant theme of my life is making the most of the utter ramshackle chaos that rains down constantly. On an up note, it has made me fantastically capable, resilient, and MacGyver levels of resourceful. Even despite all that, sometimes you just get hit with something that's too much to bear. Something where you don't understand or even feel all the effects at once, but rather it unfolds and untangles over periods of months. What do you do in that moment? What do you do in those months? Sometimes you just don't see it coming, become numb when it hits you, and are unable to watch it as it leaves just as invisible as it arrived. Not all is lost, however. For a parting gift, it gave me high blood pressure. These tiny little touches, the specks of pastel pink or unbleached titanium white here, added with a pushpin and palette knife respectively, infuse an element of, you guessed it, chaos, to help the entire work feel more natural, more like it was just unearthed from a cave or happened from some natural phenomenon. The tiniest bit of marks here go a long distance, so I find myself taking away almost as many as I add, and sometimes blending them down into the smallest little washes of pigment. Unless you really look, you never really know they were there. But if you've watched this video this far, feel free to pause and scroll forward or back and see if you can find a dozen or so touches just like this. I'm applying a transparent gloss medium here as the layer upon layer buildup has overdulled the area, and in the process a lot of the detail and delicate touches have been washed out. As this layer dries, it makes the area once again show its depth and the interplay between the layers as intended, and helps to offset the dominant reds and oranges you see immediately above. My studio is always prepared and adjusted to whatever pieces I'm working on at the moment. Detail obsessed as I am, I make sure that all I need is readily reachable when seated upon my trusty blue stool, which is a tool or piece of furniture, perspective depending, of great repute in my home, if not outright legend. I can tell when a piece is close to being done, as it seems much harder to progress or add anything to, so it ends up sitting around the studio for great lengths of time. It may move from place to place, less to be stepped on or worse, as I go through my other supplies and setups for other projects I have in the various states of their completion, or simply intending to other arenas of my life as one does. Chaos, again, enters the frame, in this form as a layer of thick dust on the painting's face. That's one of those tiny charms about New York. The pollution of the outside mixes with the dust influx of the inside to provide another extra little spice of living here. As such, I have a special brush for removing any buildup on my paintings if they've sat around for a week or more, patiently waiting to be finished, like waiting for the sun to reemerge in the late fall after a rainstorm. I almost never come up with a name for my work in the moment, but with the various missteps and bad luck encountered during the creation period, and with the piece itself seemingly taking on the characteristics of fire, I thought it apt to christen this piece Forge. The intricate balance of using chaos in all its forms to create something refined and strong is an art form itself, and like the documentation of its creation, something I hope every one of you can enjoy.